So when you hear the word economics, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it, complicated charts and those flashing stock tickers? Well, let's try to reframe that. Because at its core, economics is really just a powerful way of thinking about the world and the choices we all make every single day. Let's get into it. And we can start with a question for you right now. What did you give up to watch this? Seriously. Maybe it was a few extra minutes of sleep or getting a head start on a work project. Maybe just scrolling through social media. Whatever it was, you made a choice. And in the world of economics, every single choice has a cost. And that cost, it actually has a name: opportunity cost. This is one of the biggest ideas in all of economics. The real cost of any action isn't just about the money you spend. It's the value of the next best thing you could have done instead. So the opportunity cost of watching this right now might be that amazing nap you sacrificed. A worthy trade-off, I hope. Which brings us to our first big idea here. You are an economist. Yep, you. Whether you know it or not, you're constantly making these little economic calculations, weighing the costs and benefits with pretty much every decision you make. I mean, think about it. Every single day, you are navigating the fundamental economic problem. You're trying to balance your needs and your wants. Needs, that's the easy stuff, the essentials for survival like food and a place to live. Wants, well, that's everything else, the things that are nice to have but aren't essential, like a vacation or the latest phone. This tension, this pull between your unlimited wants and our limited resources, that's what economics is all about. Now, you'd think we'd make all these choices in a perfectly logical way, right? But here's where it gets really, really interesting. Our brains are not always the rational calculators we imagine them to be. In fact, they've got some predictable little quirks that lead us to make some very weird choices. For example, take the anchoring bias. This is our tendency to get completely latched on to the very first piece of information we see. You've definitely seen this before. Ever spotted a t-shirt marked as originally $100, now just $30? That $100, that's the anchor. It's probably a totally inflated price, but it makes the $30 price tag feel like an absolutely incredible deal, and it completely skews your decision. Or what about the paradox of choice? This is the idea that more isn't always better. Have you ever scrolled through a streaming service with literally thousands of movies and shows? You spend so much time trying to pick the perfect one that you either give up, or when you finally choose, you feel kind of let down, wondering if you missed something better. Too many options can actually lead to paralysis. So, it all begs the question, are we truly rational? Probably not. Our spending is influenced by all sorts of things that aren't purely logical, right? Peer pressure, plain old habit, just following our gut. Or maybe we just don't have all the information. Turns out, being human makes for some pretty messy economics. Okay, so we've seen how economics applies to us as individuals. Now let's zoom out. Let's scale up. Economists use a pretty specific toolkit to analyze not just one person's decisions, but the choices and goals of entire societies. When you're looking at a whole country, economists are generally focused on three main goals. First, using our limited resources efficiently, getting the most value without being wasteful. Second, trying to achieve a fair or equitable distribution of wealth, which is always a massive debate. And third, creating a stable society where people can actually plan for the future. These are the big picture objectives that guide national economic policy. And to talk about these goals, economists use two different kinds of language. Positive statements just describe what is. They're objective facts, like unemployment is at 5%. But normative statements describe what ought to be. They're subjective opinions based on values, like we should lower unemployment. Knowing the difference is so important for spotting when a debate is about facts versus when it's really about values. Here's another crucial tool: understanding the difference between nominal and real values. So let's say you get a big pay raise from $100 a week to $200. Nominally, you're twice as well off. Awesome. But what if the cost of your groceries and your rent also doubles? In real terms, what your money can actually buy, you're no better off. Inflation can be like a silent pickpocket. And yeah, sometimes things go very, very wrong. The economy isn't some smooth, predictable machine. It moves in cycles of booms and busts, and history is absolutely littered with dramatic economic crises that have shaped the world we live in. I mean, just look at this quick timeline. Back in 1929, the Wall Street crash kicks off the Great Depression. Then you fast forward to 1993, and you get the Celtic Tiger, this insane economic boom in Ireland. But then, just over a decade later in 2007, the Great Recession hits, reminding us all just how quickly fortunes can turn on a dime. And these events have a massive human cost. During the Great Depression, that number on your screen, 15 million, that was the number of Americans who were unemployed by 1933. That is nearly 30% of the workforce. These aren't just statistics. They represent immense suffering and real hardship for millions of people. So what do we learn from all these painful events? Well, economists have studied these crises like crazy and come away with some key lessons. Governments should be really careful with their spending. We need to watch how much credit is being created. And on a personal level, households should be cautious about taking on too much debt. For a lot of countries, focusing on exports is a key path to growth. And that leads us to our final section. Because, not everyone agrees on the best way to manage an economy. Not even close. In fact, for centuries, there's been this huge debate between great minds with very different ideas about what actually makes an economy tick. So here's a quick look at 3 of the major playbooks. You've got the classical school, led by Adam Smith, who basically believed the free market will regulate itself. Then there's the Keynesian school, born from the Great Depression, which argues that government has to step in to manage the economy. And then the monetarist school, championed by Milton Friedman, which is all about controlling the money supply. Think of them as competing strategies for the same big game. Adam Smith's big idea was this concept of the invisible hand. He argued that when we all act in our own self-interest, the butcher sells you meat to make a profit, not because he likes you, we unintentionally end up benefiting society as a whole. The market, if you just leave it alone, creates a kind of natural harmony. But then the Great Depression happened, and that invisible hand seemed to have, vanished. John Maynard Keynes came along and argued that in a crisis, the market can get stuck. He said that when people stop spending, the government has to be the one to step in and spend money itself to boost demand and get things moving again. It was a totally revolutionary idea that changed economics forever. Okay, so let's bring it all together. What are your key takeaways here? First, every single choice has an opportunity cost. Second, our brains are predictably irrational, and that messes with our choices. Third, economics gives us a toolkit to understand everything from our personal budget to the national stage. And finally, that big debate over the best way to run an economy, it is still very much alive today. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. As you look at the world around you, which big idea do you think is running things today? Is it Smith's invisible hand still guiding the markets? Or is it Keynes's ideas shaping how governments respond to a crisis? The real answer? Well, it's complicated. But now you have the tools to start finding it for yourself. Thanks for joining me.